Welcome to the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mackowski. It's Women's History Month, and so I'm going to bring on someone to kick off the month who's so cool, it's in her name. Anna Kulcsar from the Bentonville State Historic Park in North Carolina. Anna, how are you today?
Doing really well. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome,
Thank you.
awesome, awesome, awesome. So delighted to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here. I've never done anything like this, so this is going to be a fun time.
Well, I appreciate you taking a time out to talk with us today because you're like eyeball deep in preparations for the big 160th
Mhm,
anniversary commemoration of the Battle of Bentonville. You guys
mhm.
have a lot going on. Let's take a second to talk about that.
Um, we there are so many tasks that go into preparing for a reenactment that I never even considered. The amount of like toilets we've ordered, porta potties we've ordered today. I mean, how many cords of wood do you need for 1,000 reenactors? Stuff like that has been really unique to see behind the scenes of a reenactment. How many play keppies do I need to order for kids in the gift shop? Like that kind of stuff has been really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, wow. So a lot of moving parts.
So many.
So tell us, like, if I'm a member of the public and I want to come to
Mhm.
Bentonville for the 160th anniversary, what schedule of events might be laid out for me?
So we're going to do two different battle scenarios, which are going to be really cool. We're going to do on the first day of the reenactment, we're going to do last grand charge of the Army of Tennessee, which is just
Oh.
this incredible sweeping movement by the last what 4,000 last few people left in the Army of Tennessee. And they're going to successfully push a really large Union army back. And that's going to be a really cool thing to see those flags just streaming across the field. Like you're not going to want to miss that. And then the second day, we're going to do Mower's Charge, which is on day 3 of the Battle of Bentonville. That has never seen the light of day as far as reenactments go. That's never been done. So I think that's going to be a really exciting to see some really aggressive Union actions on the last day of one of the last battles. And we're going to have we have a couple really great speakers lined up. Wade Sokolowski, who's written a couple books on Confederate medical history. That's going to be really good. We have a really large medical reenactor presence. So the National Civil War Medicine Museum is going to be there with a replica ambulance and a stretcher from the battle. Like
Wow.
that is incredible. So we have the Society of Civil War Surgeon is coming. They're going to set up and do camp, and I heard that they might be doing an eye surgery reenactment and amputations, and like there's something for every kind of Civil War, every kind of Civil War buff. There's quiet areas if you're not into the Civil War and you're getting dragged by your family. Like this is going to be an event you're not going to want to miss.
Wow. And so this has been quite a while in the making. And, it really is sort of a capstone event for the
Mhm.
160th anniversary because it's one of the last largest battles of the war. Um,
Absolutely.
and what's it been like for you to help organize this and bring this vision to reality?
So I have never worked this side of a reenactment. So I have all these really fun ideas that Colby and Derek will be like, yes, but there's going to be 20,000 people here. Yes, but maybe that won't work. So it's been really fun for me to work with people who have gone through the ringer, so to speak, on reenactments, but also be able to like bring some new ideas. Like I'm working on getting a quiet area for, I have a son that's like highly ADHD. And so getting a quiet area for some people that are different abilities or whatever, like that's been really fun, be able to like plan from a different side than what the
Yeah.
guys who have usually been a part of this.
Well, now you're expecting 20,000 people. And of course,
Mhm.
Bentonville, it's just a few miles off the highway, so it's not that far out of the way. But I mean, when you get out to Bentonville, you feel like you're kind of
In the
out
middle of
in the
nowhere.
middle of nowhere, right?
Mhm.
So, how do you deal with 20,000 people suddenly creating a small city in the middle of nowhere?
We park in every open field. We're going to close the roads. Not that many people come down these roads, but we're going to close the roads. Like we bring in as many deputies as we can get from the Johnson County Police Department. Like we go into full force. We're like, I was in town telling the coffee shop in town, like, get ready, March is coming. Like you are going to have enough orders to get you through the rest of the year. So it's just a lot of like, kind of hurry up and wait though, because there's no infrastructure, so there's not a lot we can do now, but once we get closer to March, it'll really all start rolling out. And we bought like 260 traffic cones this last week, and like just all of these logistical things that I would have never even thought about.
Wow. Now, a second ago, you mentioned Colby and Derek. You
Mhm.
actually have Colby Squared at
We do.
Bentonville.
Mhm.
Let's give a shout out to your colleagues who are also helping out. Tell us who else is involved and kind of what they're doing.
So Colby Stevens is the site manager. He is really our reenactor whisperer, and he is so good at that. He's getting the best of the best that we could find in the country to come, and he's working on artillery crews, and he's getting cavalry to come in. He's really good at speaking their language and setting up these scenarios, and doing that. Derek is our logistical king. Like, if it needs to be thought of Derek Brown, he's thought of it. He's the one that's the driving force behind ordering these 200 porta potties that we ordered today, and like making sure that every staff member coming has a hotel room to stay in, and like all of these things. We're pulling staff from like 20 historic sites around North Carolina, because we have a full-time staff of 5 at Bentonville, so we need all of the help we can get. He's the logistical king there. Colby Lipscomb, he's so good at working with community groups. He's pulling in all of the local people that we can get. He's got a great lineup of food trucks that are going to be here. Like, we've got 10 or 12 food trucks. So we're all working as a team really to make this what I think is going to be a great event. I could not do a single thing without those 3 guys. They're
And you
my
have
favorite.
very good relationship with the local landowner. So you said you're
Mhm.
parking cars any space you have.
Literally,
You've got a
literally.
lot of spaces to work with because you guys
Mhm.
have, as a historic site, good relations with the folks who are still private landowners in the area.
Absolutely.
Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that because I think that that's a super important part of like how you guys are able to present what you're able to present.
So the Bentonville, actually, we own about 2,600 acres, and a lot of that land, we, because there's 5 of us, are not going to be able to do anything with it. We lease it back to the local farmers. So a lot of our income as a historic site comes from these farmers, and they appreciate. A lot of them are the ones who sold us the land or sold it to the Civil War Trust, who then donated it to the state of North Carolina. They sold it to us in the first place, and so they've been a part of the Bentonville story from day one. Some of these families that they've been there, their grandfathers were the ones who like willed it to the Bentonville, the early beginnings of Bentonville, and so they've seen us grow, and they've been excited for the most part. I can't think of anybody who hasn't been excited to see new trails go on their land, and to see people out and about. And we'll hear comments from farmers that say, this past Sunday there was a whole bunch of people parked at the coal plantation parking lot. They're always excited to see people out and about, even when we're not there.
Well, it is kind of cool because they actually get to see like, wow, well, this does make a difference. Like people
Mhm.
are out here exploring this and
Absolutely.
seeing this,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I know talking with Derek,
Hmm.
there are farmers whose families have been there since the battle. So this
Hmm.
is really important to the
Yeah.
people who live on this land and
Hmm.
their interactions with
It is.
you. And
Hmm.
it's neat to see a historic site that's got such a great relationship with the people who are literally living on the land.
Absolutely. That's a good way to put it, living on the land.
Yeah.
This is their homes, and they let us into it, and they let us tell the stories that we have to tell at Bentonville.
So I'm going to cheerlead for you for just a second because you and
Hmm.
I just first met back in September, and I had the
Hmm.
chance to come to the battlefield, and Gary Edelman and I were doing some tours and worked with Colby and Derek and you, and so you and I spent some time kind of in one of the historic structures on the battlefield, and you were talking about how the room really spoke to you, and the blood
Hmm.
stains on the floor, and the
Hmm.
story of the family and stuff, and like I was just so amazed at the way like you had the spark in your eye and you brought the story to life. Yeah, just like everything you want from an interpreter when you come to a site. I mean, it was just
Thank,
wonderful.
thank you,
Mhm.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I do. I love. If 12-year-old me could see that I work full time at a Civil War battlefield, I'd be dead. I'd be dropped on the floor.
So how did you get from 12-year-old you to being able to do tours and programs?
It has been a journey. I got a degree online because I have 2 kids that were literally sitting on my feet while I was writing papers, and I never thought that I would actually get to use my degree. Like I was doing this for me. I thought it would be cool to just have a history degree. I've always loved the Civil War. We moved to North Carolina in the middle of COVID. Do not recommend. Literally, it was like May of 2020 that we moved. So
Oh gosh.
lockdown central, but we're like, we got to get out of Chicago. So I came to Bentonville as a visitor for the first time ever. Like I'd never heard of Bentonville, nothing. March of 2021, I talked to them. They were like, oh, we need you. Like, this is it. So I volunteered. I volunteered for, I'm pretty sure, all of like 3 weeks. And they were like, hey, we just had a part-time spot open. Do you want us? Absolutely. Like, this is not a question. Absolutely. So I went from volunteer to part-time. I worked part-time for a year. And then last October, I went full-time at Bentonville. I have loved getting to start as a volunteer and work up at part-time and work to full-time, because I've gotten to see like every aspect of the way the battlefield works. And then I've gotten to kind of have some mentorship with some new people that come in, new college students or high schoolers that like, how do I get a job? Gotta just get in there. Like you got to get in there and do the stuff. And nothing I learned in college prepared me for working at a Civil War site. Like I don't think you can teach the conversations I've had to have, the like
Yeah.
out there questions that you get. Like I had a third grader ask me if I've ever licked the blood stain on the floor. Like, no, I have not. I have not. So like getting there and getting to a site and like just being there, I think has been incredible.
It's a really neat story of sort of like getting in, volunteering,
Mm-hmm.
paying your
Mm-hmm.
dues, sort of working
Mm-hmm.
your way up.
Absolutely.
What lit your fire about wanting to do history in the first place?
My dad and I, when it was probably 2003. I'm going to date myself a little bit because I'm 30 now. We would go to the library and we would
Oh, you
check out,
young pup. Let me just
I
say.
know, I know. We would check out one VHS tape a week of Ken Burns. Neither my dad nor I, because I was like 6, we didn't know anything about the Civil War, but we would like religiously watch one video at a week at a time, go return the next one, go get it. I would rewind and I would watch and I would watch. And those stories, like I'm not so good at tactics. I'm not so good at understanding the battles, but like the stories that Ken Burns told and that he brought to life, like I needed to tell those stories. And my siblings, they hardcore resent me in all of the best ways, because all of our family vacations, we'd track from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee, and we'd go battlefield stomping, and we didn't know what we were looking at. Like I found myself at the 140, it's probably the 145th of Gettysburg at anniversary reenactment, and I'd never been to Gettysburg before. I'd never been to a reenactment before. And so just being there, like I can read about it in a book, but getting your feet on that ground and breathing that air, like it got stuck. It got stuck in me.
So that power of place, which to me is
Mm-hmm.
such an evocative way to experience and get hooked by
Mm-hmm.
history in general,
Mm-hmm.
walking the battlefields to me is
Absolutely.
particularly resonant.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Bentonville specifically.
Yeah.
If you go out on a day and you've just like, I need to get out of the office for a second, I need to walk the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go when you're at Bentonville?
Great question. I go to the Michigan Engineers trenches. It's a short. I love logistics, and these engineers are my boys. I love these guys. It's a short walk from the visitor center to just go and like, I sit on the bridge that crosses over the trenches and just look at how cool it is. These thumbprints from these engineers, essentially, they dug these trenches 160 years ago now, and they are still so clear and so pristine, and just kind of sit in the quiet at the driving tour loop. It's a really cool. That's my favorite spot.
It's and to me, like having those physical reminders of like the people who were here before
Mm-hmm.
you, and like they have left their signature on the ground essentially through their
Mm-hmm.
labor.
You
And
can look at a museum and see a gun. You can see a knapsack, whatever. But to go on the site and see 160 years ago, there were people that were really scared. They were afraid that they were about to go into a battle. Engineers don't really like to go into battles. They're afraid that they're going into a battle. They're digging these to save their lives and to save their army, because they're called up just as a last ditch effort, literally, in
yeah.
case the army falls back to them. And just to see that still there is really cool.
Wow. And you guys have a relatively new trail
Mhm.
down to the bullpen, which
That's
was an
also one of my
area
favorite
that had
spots.
been inaccessible for a long time, and it
Mhm.
saw some pretty unique fighting. Tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about what it's like to walk down into that area.
It's one of my favorite parts about that is how dark and shaded it is. And I think that just kind of illustrates how little they knew what was going on around them. That these men are fighting really hard in these close woods, up on their trenches. There's a great quote about the bullpen where a federal soldier remembered the Confederates slamming into their trenches being like the foam on the side of a boat. They're just they're hitting our trenches and they're like fading away. Like it's a close place. The woods are like really close on you. You can only see that couple feet in front of you, and the Union is getting hit on one side in their trenches on the bullpen, and then they're having to turn and fight on the other side in their trenches because the Confederates get behind them, and then they're having to turn to the other side because the Confederates get around their flank. It's this confusing, smoke-filled place, and I think the closeness of the shadedness of the trees like helps me understand that just a little bit more.
And I'll admit it was a little disconcerting for me the first time I walked down in there, shortly right after the trail opened up. And there was an old tree farm there. So there were like old rows that looked at
Mm-hmm.
first like earthworks. And I'm like, wait, and so
Mm-hmm.
sort of figuring out the lay of the land, as someone who tries to read the ground, it was
Right.
a little confusing.
It's hard. It's a hard.
But then knowing that the fighting was happening in both directions just adds extra
It
confusion.
does. It just adds extra layers of flavor to that really incredible spot. Yeah. And that's a really unique spot too because there are 4 Medal of Honors that were received for actions at Bentonville, and 2 of them are in that bullpen location. I think that just illustrates too how hard we're fighting here.
Wow. It is an incredible story. And I think the new trail really helps show and tell that story
Mm-hmm.
in a pretty cool way. Now, you said you like the stories so much,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as opposed to necessarily the tactical movements and the
Mm-hmm.
regiment. And I'm
Yeah.
100% on that same page. So, what's one of the stories that really stands out for you that really resonates with you?
Peter T. Anderson is one of my favorite stories. He's one of our 4 Medal of Honor guys here at Bentonville. He was just about to turn 18 in March of 1865. As the Union Army is getting pushed back, actually, in the last grand charge of Army of Tennessee, this hole is created in the Union line. They don't realize there's a hole, and in that hole has fallen one of 4 cannons in Webb's battery, which is 19th Indiana Light Artillery. This one cannon is singled out. The other 3 in the battery have been destroyed. This one cannon is hooked up to its horses, it's hooked up to its limber, but all of its cannoneers are gone. They've all fled. Peter T. Anderson gets called up in the 31st Wisconsin, and he sees this cannon is just sitting there. He turns to his friend, and he says, "Hey, look, we got to go get that cannon." His friend says, "Absolutely not. That is not my job." He runs away. So Peter T's like, "I guess I got to go do it." So the 17-year-old kid is going to run up to that cannon. He's going to try to hop on the horses. When he tries to hop on the horse, the stirrup is shot out, so he cannot ride this horse. So he said in his kind of after action report that I just moved it along with my ramrod. The Union lines, after they fell back, were about a quarter of a mile behind where this cannon was. He talks about running through Confederate forces the whole time. At one point, a Confederate officer pulls a gun and points it at his head and says, "Surrender, you damn Yankee." And he doesn't surrender. He keeps going with this cannon. Kind of a reference, a cannon can take anywhere from up to 4 to 6 horses to move. So one 17-year-old kid moving a cannon in the middle of firing. He stopped, or in the middle of like a battle. He stopped at one point to fire his gun. A bullet ricocheted off of his gun and hit his finger, and it
Oh,
broke the
wow.
barrel. So he's not able to fire his gun. He doesn't have any weapons. He gets it back to Union lines. Major Houtling, who is just happens to be the Union artillery commander, for Sherman's army, or the 14th Corps, sees this and he's like, "What on earth? Who is this kid?" And so that evening, Peter T. Anderson is called into Sherman's tent. Um, Peter Anderson is this really humble kid. He's pretty sure he's going to get in trouble for something. He wrote afterward. He was like, I didn't know what was happening." Sherman, he gets to Sherman's tent. Sherman says, "Sit down, son." He stands up and he gives his chair to him, and he says, "We heard about what happened today." He gave him his commendation, and right then he recommended him for a Medal of Honor. The
Wow.
17-year-old kid, He did not have to do that. He did not have to go and rescue that cannon. The other three had already been lost. I think he knew probably somewhere in his mind that like this cannon is going to get turned on me if we don't go and get it. And he went and he did that above and beyond action, and he got a Medal of Honor for that. That's one of my favorite stories.
Wow. I can only imagine what it's like to try to move this cannon by yourself using your ramrod, like
Right.
just push it. Like, wow.
These horses are scared already. Like they don't like this sort of thing. A cannon is heavy. This is a 12-pound Napoleon cannon. So it's a big cannon. Like this is a big boy with Confederates on all sides. Like it's a movie scene waiting to happen.
Wow. One of the stories that always resonated with me at Bentonville actually relates to Confederate General William Hardee, who
Mhm.
loses his son, which of course, for anybody in war, that's a terrible, terrible thing. But here we are in the last days of the war, and Hardee has his son killed.
Mhm.
Tell us that story if you.
So Hardy's son, Willie J. Hardy Jr., I think he's a junior, he was like 16 or 17. He'd been asking the whole war, "You got to put me in, coach. Let me go in, dad. Let me go in." And he said no and no and no. Hardy puts his son on somebody's staff, and he's like, this is all right, but like, I want to go into battle. This seems like a safe time, so he puts him in, I believe, with the 8th Terry's Texas Rangers. He's able to ride in with them. um, Mark Bradley kind of describes it as a tip of the hat moment that Hardee sees his son goes in and he waves him off. And the Confederates are successful and they do push off the Union forces. But when they come back, his son is slumped over in the saddle. He's being helped by another man and he's got this really nasty abdominal wound. And they send him back to Hillsborough to the Beehive, because it's a hive of Confederate women activity, kind of a fun name. But and he is going to end up dying there with his stepmother a couple days later. So it's this heartbreaking, like he made it the whole war, and the one time he sends him in is the time that he gets killed.
Yeah. And Hardee, of course, old and reliable,
Mm-hmm.
kind of one of the grand old men of the Confederate Army,
Mm-hmm.
and makes it all the way through the war to see that happen. Like, just what a
That's
tragedy.
heartbreaking. What a tragedy in the last battle. Like it's one of the last actions at the Battle of Bentonville, which is one of the last battles of the war. Like you made it so long just to which I think that really illustrates that like that humanity and that heartbreak that comes with the Civil War.
Yeah. Now, I had the privilege to have you tell me another great story there when we were at the Harper House,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about the Harper family, which also was a very compelling story,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because you really used the room that we were in to raise lots of questions and give me lots to think about as I
Mm-hmm.
left.
Good,
Uh,
good. I'm
so,
glad.
so tell us about the Harper House.
So the Harper House, it was built in 1855. It is kind of new construction by the time of the Civil War rolls around. Still, the Harpers are large landowners. They've got about 800 acres in the area. Bentonville is really heavily longleaf pine trees, so they're heavy in the turpentine industry. So the Harpers are fairly well to do. Um, the main road in Bentonville, which was the old Goldsboro Road, goes right past the Harper House. So the morning of March 19th, approximately like 30,000 men are going to march past the Harper House. They say every half hour, another 1,000 men is marching past the Harper House. That is a lot of people. You never know if your house is going to get taken as a hospital or somebody's headquarters or whatever, but you got a pretty solid chance. It's not a heavily populated area, so I'm sure that the Harpers knew at some point something is going to come to our house. By late afternoon on the first day of the battle, March 19th, their home has been taken by the 14th Corps medical director, and over the course of 3 days, the Harper family's home is going to see about 500 Union and 54-ish Confederates come through their house as a hospital. The Harper family is not driven from their property. So for 3 days, they're going to stay in the upstairs story of their house while the downstairs story is being used as a hospital.
Wow. Wow. And there's a testament to the occupation of the house. You pointed out bloodstains that were
Mhm.
on the floor there, and
Absolutely.
there's a wonderful medical display that shows sort of the evocative nature of what it was
Mhm.
like to use that as a field
Mhm.
hospital. And to what I walked away with was like, one day they're maybe using this room for family activities,
Mhm.
and the enslaved folks are outside the door
Mhm.
with the summer kitchen, and then suddenly the next day, this is a field hospital, and the whole life of this family is turned
Mhm.
upside down.
24 hours is incredible how much the Civil War changes people's lives. Like they may have just been going about their business March 17th. The Civil War, the armies had not really touched this part of Eastern North Carolina yet. They were pretty inland. And now the army is here and their lives are completely radically transformed. There's quite a few bloodstains in the house, and like you can you can put a rug, you can do what you can to cover up the fact that your home was used that way so you can go about your daily life. But that's always going to be a part of your family's kind of DNA now. Like we were a Civil War hospital. We were here and we saw the suffering and the resilience, and we were a part of all of that.
Kind of one of the things that I think is really cool about your historic site is, you've got the Harper House, you've got like the civilian story, you've got an original
Mm-hmm.
structure that you can tell, you've got an area where there are a bunch of monuments, you've got an
Yeah.
area where there's a cemetery, you've got areas where there are earthworks, you've got areas where there are trails, lots and lots of preserved land.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like everything you want to see if you go visit a battlefield.
Absolutely. I love the fact that we get to not only talk about battle, it's a big battle, but what happens after a battle? How does a community rebuild? How does people like the Harpers, how do they recover when something like a battle happens in their yard? Or, we get this really cool opportunity to not just talk about the boom boom of the guns, but what happens afterwards.
Yeah. Now, Bentonville, to me, seems like one of those battles that has always flown under the radar screen for
Mhm.
Civil War buffs. It's like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, wait, there was that thing.
Oh yeah, there was that one thing
Yeah,
happening.
why is that?
I think we get overshadowed by Appomattox, where March 15 and 16 is this year, March 19th to the 21st of 65. There's a lot of things that happen in April of 65. It's just like another day, another super important Civil War date. And I think the fact that what I have experienced in Civil War studies, that a lot of people love the Lee, Jackson, Grant stories, and some of these Western armies kind of get a little bit forgotten. I mean, nobody can forget Sherman, but I think it just gets overshadowed by some of the like popular history stuff that happens, if that makes sense. No shade to Petersburg, no
Yeah.
shade to Appomattox, but yeah.
But like, isn't that crazy though? Like the Western Theater and Sherman are in North Carolina. Like, what does that
Mhm.
tell you about the war at that point?
Right, like it is not going well for one half, and it's going pretty well for the other half.
So one of the things that I also like about Bentonville is you have this real hodgepodge collection of commanders on both
Mhm.
sides, because
Absolutely.
Sherman has people underneath him who are from the Eastern and Western armies by that point. So
Mhm.
kind of a real mix of commands underneath
Mhm.
him. The Confederate Army is really been hobbled together by Joe Johnston in kind of this crazy sort of way. And so
Mhm.
you've got lots of people showing up in from all over, both theaters, and a
Mhm.
lot of different armies in different capacities. Evander Law serving as a cavalry commander. We know
I
him
know
in
it.
the East as an infantry guy. So like as an interpreter, like what sort of sense do you make from this quilt work of people?
I think it shows desperation, really. Like that's a easy thing to communicate to visitors, is that like this is the state we're in, where the Confederates are just like, please come do something. We we're pulling Evander Law to be cavalry. We're pulling just about anybody we can get. It's a good communicator of the desperation and kind of, I think, the skill of the Confederates, that they're able to switch. Okay, I'm going to pivot now from being a fairly successful infantry commander to now I'm going to go cavalry.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing to communicate.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the commanders. What's
Mhm.
your assessment of Sherman? What's your assessment of Joe Johnston?
Sherman here is a little bit too high on his horse.
Mhm.
He like I love me some Sherman. Don't get me wrong. Bentonville starts as him stumbling into a battle that he didn't believe was going to happen. He's been running into like a little bit of Confederate pushback here and there since he left Savannah. But he's, oh, it's fine. Like, they're not gonna be able to field an army. And so the first day goes pretty poorly for the Union Army because Sherman is not at the top of his game. He's kind of like resting on his laurels. And the Confederates know, like, this is it. Lee has been sending messages, you've got to do something, because if Sherman's able to connect with Grant, like, the war's up for us. So you see this really incredible hard fighting stance from Joe Johnson, which doesn't always happen with him.
Right.
It's just, this is a little bit of a different thing for him. So it's really cool to see him kind of that last full measure of like, I've got to throw everything we can into this.
And you know, of course, Joe Johnson, famous for falling back and falling back,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. But one of his underlying philosophies was, you know, I'm falling back because I'm looking for the opportunity.
Mhm.
And Sherman's army is divided at this point, and so he sees that opportunity and
Mhm.
attacks. And as you
Yes.
said, it's sort of this act of desperation. He's got a hodgepodge force underneath him that you know, the remnants of the Army of the Tennessee, which met its doom in Franklin and Nashville,
Mhm. Mhm.
Hardy's guys from Charleston, like, hey, let's bring Braxton Bragg back out of
Braxton Bragg and Hoke from Lee's army. Yeah, this is this incredible Confederate patchwork. Where else but at Bentonville are you going to see so many big names get to experience their final combat for a lot of them here at Bentonville?
And I think about what a command challenge that must be for Johnson in particular, who's got these disparate personalities who aren't used to working with each other, some of whom are super prickly.
Or
Like,
have
hey,
worked
wait.
together and said never again, like Braxton Bragg and Joe Johnson. Like, please don't make me do this, Jefferson Davis. I can't play with this kid. But they make it work, sort of enough to get us through the Battle of Bentonville.
Yeah. So, do you think, you know, you said Sherman's riding his high horse a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, how do you think Johnston does?
I think Johnston does as well as he can with the cards that he's dealt. He really does. Like, there's not necessarily a clear winner after day one. It's kind of a tactical withdrawal. He does a good job at holding against 30,000, which is, I mean, that's a lot compared to his 24,000 that he can only field at one time. I think he does pretty well at that whole hammer and anvil move that we see on the first day on the coal plantation, where he's drawing the Union troops into a trap and he hits them really hard. Like, that's good planning. You can thank Wade Hampton a little bit for picking this spot.
Yeah,
Wade Hampton, Wade, that's another name. That
there's
what's he
another one.
doing down here in North Carolina? Like, I think he does really well at picking the ground to make his last stand, picking the ground to do the rest of the days. I mean, what else was he supposed to do but pull back once the full 60,000 is here? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, what I often wonder, what did he expect to happen once he crushed one wing? You're gonna have to take casualties. Are you gonna turn and take another 30,000 wing? But I think he did well. I think he did as well as he could have.
Yeah. Now, of course, Joseph Maurer gets in his rear and
Mm-hmm.
shakes things up, and he has to pull out. And
Mm-hmm.
um, and Maurer, I kind of like just because of this swamp lizard nickname,
I know it. He's
sort of fun.
fantastic.
I,
He's told, do not engage the enemy, and Mower says, well, I'm just kind of gonna like see what's over here. I'm sure there's nobody over here, fully knowing that they're over there. Like, I'm gonna go over there. And that was one of the things that Sherman even said he regretted after the battle, is I should have let him keep going. I should have let him keep going.
because to me, that's probably the great what if of the battle is he gets in there, he stirs things up, and
Mhm.
had he kept going, he really could have cut Johnson
He
off and
basically had
probably
already
cheap,
taken
right?
the bridge,
Yeah.
and Sherman says, "Nah." I said, "I told you no, come back." But
Oops.
oh, so sorry. No,
So are there might have beens, are there what ifs that linger after Bentonville?
absolutely. I mean, Sherman could have ended the war at least in the West right then and there. I think had he captured Johnson, Mower overran Johnson's headquarters. In Mower's charge, like, he may have been able to end the war there well, probably not the whole war, but this portion of the war, if he'd been able to capture Johnson, and that's a what if he had cut off the bridge and been able to capture a large portion of the army, I think that's a big what if.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people want to come to the 160th
Mhm.
and explore this battle, or just come to the battlefield without the 160th and the
Please
20,000
do.
other people that come, what do you recommend folks to do? Where do they start? What do they see?
Definitely come visit our visitor center. That's a great place to start. We have a 15-minute orientation film that is really helpful. We also have this really cool, as long as it lasts, fiber optic map that walks you through the first day of the battle. It doesn't have a lot of time left on this earth, but as long as it is, it's a really helpful tool to kind of help you grasp Bentonville. Bentonville is a little bit hard to understand because we have no terrain. It's super flat. You can go to Gettysburg and point to Culp's Hill or wherever. Bentonville is real. So come talk to us at the visitor center. We'll get you set up to go on the driving tour or to take a Harper House tour. But we also have a 10-mile driving loop around the battlefield. We've got stops. We have an audio portion which is actually narrated by Mark Bradley, who he kind of wrote the Bible on Bentonville. His book, The Last Stand in the Carolinas, is super, super great book. And he does a narration for that. So take a driving tour, take a walk on our trails. We have 5 miles of trails, and we have a new trail we're getting ready to open soon. And that's just a really cool way to get into the heart of the battlefield is walk on a trail.
Yeah, a beautifully preserved battlefield. I mean, just
Mhm.
lots of really cool. I was about to say terrain, but like you're right, it's all just sort of
There's no
a
train.
lot of
It's
really cool flatness out there.
there's another field and there's another field, but they're all wonderful fields.
But even there though, I remember being out there once and like just seeing a full cotton field, which a lot of
Mhm.
us Northerners is like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like holy cow. But
Mhm.
that itself is like, I think really impactful. Like, we
Absolutely.
forget like the war is about slavery and that's really
Mhm.
centered around cotton. And so
It
like to
is.
sort of experience that is, I
Mhm.
think, really important.
It's really, yeah, it kind of recenters the Civil War a little bit for me. Like it's more than cool personalities and crazy cannon rescue stories, but it's a story of bringing freedom to 400 million people, or 4 million. I don't remember the number of
Yeah.
slaves, but you know what I mean. It's a story of bringing freedom to people, and that kind of recenters it for me a little bit.
Yeah. So once the 160th passes,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that you and your colleagues will all take well-deserved vacations for a few days. Um, what's next for you in your career?
Um, just continuing to learn, continuing to grow, like whether that's at Bentonville or wherever I go, I just always want to be committed to like finding that next really great story to show with somebody, to share with somebody. I'm going to 7 first grade classrooms tomorrow. So like to just I want wherever my career takes me to help people to continue to enjoy Bentonville, to continue to understand the Civil War as best I can, that sort of thing. Wherever, whatever battlefield, whatever closet I find myself in, like.
Yeah, here we are. We're half an hour into the conversation, or whatever, and it's like I don't think I've even mentioned that you're the education specialist at the Bentonville battlefield.
Mhm.
So you spend
Yep,
a lot of time working with school groups.
I do. That's the my bread and butter, so to speak, is to make sure that I can give them the most um, exciting, really fun activities that also match the North Carolina curriculum.
Yeah, right, right. And I'm sure there are people who are listening, who are watching, who are like, oh, young kids, young people, they're not interested in the Civil War anymore. What's your experience with that?
They absolutely are. Give these kids, one of my favorite things to do with probably 4th grade and up is I do show and tell with the kids, but I'm going to give them an artifact and I want them to tell me about this artifact. Tell me who you think is using this. Tell me how this was used during the Civil War. And they love that. They love like getting to piece together whether it's a bullet or whether it's a canteen or whatever I give them. They so love getting to be a part of telling the stories. Um, that's really fun. I had an 8th grader tell me that Bentonville sucked a lot less than he thought it was going to. That's the highest praise I've ever gotten from a middle schooler. Like, so I love when they can walk away like knowing that they got to be a part of the learning experience instead of me just standing in front of them. This is a bayonet. This is a bullet. Like,
It sucks less than I thought it would.
That was the highest praise that you
That
could
is
get.
high praise from an eighth grader, actually. So,
Mhm, mhm.
but you're speaking to that idea of hands-on history, and you
Yep,
get them involved. It
mhm,
lights that fire. It kindles that spirit.
absolutely.
Do you get a lot of kids that actually get to come to the battlefield?
Yeah, I think that in the month of February, I have 200 kids scheduled to come,
Wow.
which is a lot right before March,
I
but
was
we
gonna say,
do.
yeah, you don't have anything else to do then,
I
right?
don't have anything else to do. It's fine. We get mostly in North Carolina. We see fourth graders and eighth graders because that's when their curriculum is going over Civil War history. But I would say we probably I think last April we had 1,000 kids come. So
Wow.
we field quite a few schools, quite a few homeschool groups. Yeah, I love when I get to interact with kids and you kind of see that spark in their eyes. I fully understand they're not all going to walk away and become Civil War historians, but just to get to connect with them a little bit. And this is your history as much as it's that guy next to you's history. And,
I'll throw in a little pitch for battlefield preservation at this point
Mhm,
because if you've got that ground, you can get the kids on that ground. Then there's that opportunity for them to walk away with something. But if you can't
mhm.
even get them there in the first place, you lose that opportunity.
Absolutely. So in Bentonville, we're really, really thankful to have the ground we do. And if you've got any ground you want to donate, give us a call and we are ready to take your call.
Yeah. And like North Carolina is super preservation friendly too. Of the many states that do preservation stuff, North Carolina is especially preservation friendly.
Mhm. I think that has to do with our good relationships with the farmers and the locals. Like Colby Stevens, shout out to him, is incredible at speaking farmer. He is incredible at cultivating these relationships and keeping us relevant and friendly in the community. And
Okay.
they want to donate their land to us because they can see that we're going to use it well.
Yeah. So this is a completely unrelated question to anything we've spoken
Hmm.
about, but behind you
Yes.
is our airplanes.
Yes. My
So I
husband is hardcore into World War II. We
okay.
can't both be Civil War.
So those are World War II
They
airplanes.
are World War II airplanes. My husband's paternal grandfather had to put out fires started by the German Luftwaffe in fields in Hungary and Romania as like a 12-year-old boy. So like we have like deep connections to World War II. And
Oh wow.
so he didn't, my husband came to America in the 90s after communism fell in Hungary. And so
Wow. There's a whole story right
there's
there.
a
Oh my
whole thing
gosh.
right there too. Yeah. So it makes me appreciate American history a little bit more
Sure,
because
sure. Yeah. So is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have or that you want to add before I finish?
mm,
See, now when you do that with your chin, and I tell this to my students, when you stroke your chin, it makes you look smarter. So that was good.
mm, I don't know. I can't think of anything.
Yeah. So I want to encourage folks to come and visit you and your colleagues.
Please do. We'd
A
love to talk to you.
wonderful staff. I'm a big fan of you guys and what you guys do there.
I wouldn't be where I am in my career without Colby and Derek. Like those three men have taught me more than anything I ever learned in a classroom. They've been really great.
So
Come
wait, let
come
me
meet
count.
us.
Let me count heads for a second, though, because you
Yeah.
said you had five full-time staffers, but you
Hmm.
mentioned Colby, Derek. There's you.
Mark is our maintenance man.
Okay, very good. Well, someone's got to mow the grass and keep
Somebody's
the
got to mow the
parking lot
grass.
open,
Somebody's got to
right?
keep those trails.
So
Mhm.
yeah, they're the unsung heroes of Battlefield.
He is. He really is. All of the things I don't want to do, Mark's got it. I nearly had to crawl on the floor today in the bathroom, the women's bathroom, because a kid like locked it from the inside. Mark got it for me. Like we love Mark. We love Mark.
Look at that coming through in the clutch right
I know
there.
it. He's got some like device to like unlock the door. So
And I want to wish you luck to you and your colleagues as you get ready for this big
thank you.
160th commemoration. You guys
Thank
are going
you.
to have great things going. I want folks to go and see what you're
Mhm.
up to.
Please do.
Add to the 20,000 that are showing up. You right now, you could be 20,001, 20,000.
I hope so. I hope to send you some tickets. Hope to see you buy tickets soon.
Very good. And what a delight to chat with you today. Thanks so much for taking some
Been
time.
a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good luck. Take care. I'm
Thank
Chris
you.
Mackowski for Emerging Civil War, the Emerging Civil War podcast. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.